Do you have any announcements? Committee members, any announcements? If there are none, then Ms. Benali, could you review the, excuse me, I'm jumping forward. For the folks on the call, please identify yourself to the committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Shache Perfilia Fowler, Division Director of Human Resources on the call. Thank you.
Good morning. Recita Toddy with the Department of Personnel Management. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Thomasita Woody. Just hired yesterday, started my new day as the Human Resources Director. Nice to meet you all's acquaintance.
Good morning, Chennai. This is Wayne Plaw, Naval Nursing Home, just listening in, hoping that we get on the agenda also. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. This is Teresa Galvan with the Office of the President and Vice President.
Anyone else?
Good morning, Eloise Brown, Northern Agency Veterans Organization Commander.
Thank you.
This is Matthew So, Department of Education.
Thank you. For the folks that have introduced themselves to the committee, Ms. Benali, can you review the agenda with the committee?
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee. You have your proposed agenda for the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee, 24th Navajo Nation Council for a work session for October 12th, 2021. Presiding is the Honorable Daniel Eso, Chairperson, and the Honorable Vice Chair, Carl R. Slater. The place is via telecommunications, Winter Rock, Navajo Nation, Arizona. 1 is call work session to order, roll call, invocation, announcements. 2, recognize guests and visiting officials. 3, review the agenda. 4 is the work session reports. A is the Division of Human Resources and Development and Department of Personnel Management. B is the Navajo Nation Veterans Administration. C is the Department of Diné Education. D is the Division of Social Services. E is the Navajo Department of Health. And 5 is the close of work session, announcement, and adjournment. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Benali. Committee members?
Motion, Delegate Paul.
Hey, Sache, good to hear your voice. Are you in Goulding too? Motion by Honorable Paul Begay.
Second, Wanika.
Oh, yeah, Tsutsila. Second by Honorable Edison Wanika.
Shania, Chair.
Yes, we are, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Tsutsila, Honorable Vice Chair Slater, you have the floor.
Thank you. I have a question. If we're in a work session mode, do we need to be motioning, et cetera?
In ever since we started, we've been doing that, and I can't remember the actual rules on the work session aspect. Ms. Benali, and I don't know if our legislative counsel is on the call to interpret that aspect for us.
Okay, well, it doesn't matter. I thought that we had in other instances not done the motioning in the second.
Yes, Mr. Chair?
Okay. Yes, Ms. Benali.
As I understand it, the work session for committees, that they are, they don't require a motion or a second or a vote. But if you would, the other option is to agree by consensus, on reports and the aspects of the agenda items.
Okay. Committee members. We know that the Division of Personnel Management is on the call. They'll go first. I didn't hear from Mr. Squirline, but did hear from Department of Education. So the latitude, I guess, is to go with who's ready and then who shows up later.
Chair, this is Wanika.
Oh, Tsutsila.
Thank you, Chair. There's a very important information that Wayne Claw has. I would appreciate if we could just put him on the agenda just for maybe at the most 5 minutes so that he can tell us the meeting that's coming up that pertains to us and I think the nation. I would really appreciate that, Chair.
Sheila. If by consensus, by consent, so we put him first and then the most 5 minutes and then we go to personnel management. We'll give the latitude to allow folks that are on the call to be able to present. What date will they, committee members? Okay, based on what's printed, then let's and the request from Honorable Edison Wanika. Let's go with Mr. Wayne Claw with Navajo Nation. Go ahead, Mr. Claw.
Good morning, Shanant. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. For some time, Navajo Independent Service Provider, NISP, consists of 8 comprised members. Cohatchee Area Opportunity and Service Station, Coyote Canyon Rehabilitation Center, St. Michael Association for Special Education, Annie Winnicott Life Care, Toye Industry, Chinle Valley School, the Nebatzee Association for Disabled Citizens, Don Hito Naval Nursing Home. Say, we've been trying to get a meeting, a letter was sent out in October to Deanna Neswit Jishi, Executive Director for Division of Social Service. So with that, at the meeting, or just a call social service, a call this group of organization that serves the Navajo Nation handicap, handicap elders. Nana, like nursing home, but that assistant living, that provides services to the elders and handicaps, all those that disabled. That it no ya a co had other meeting that it plays that it no ya the overhaul just that it no a co any letter sent out not the this whole committee as shown. He thought in store that it no. According to George, the meeting that is on October 22nd, on Friday at 10 a.m. in the morning. Hilton Garden Inn, the Gallup. As shown that the committee in the he does in Stanoya, and hopefully that social service will also be there. A lot of this has to do with some of the hardship that a lot of these programs that provide services. Nana qualified vendor agency. There's no MOA land in Inco. Sabbath Abe that Ahako, A.H. Halit Outdoors, Nisto, Halit MOA that. Updated on Missy that either you can't echo even yet. A code as shown that I know ya aided the Naval Independent Service Providers Group. And how to host I know ya as shown and George. We'll go ahead and send out a copy of all this letter that was sent to Ms. Jishi. It also gives the information on the date and time of that meeting. Even yes, or Shabbat to Dashon, but no invite the deal needs us at Hadoka. The Hess Committee that no even yes and Kodonich and Sja Isla or Lesto Ashon Dani, which and another year we've been meeting with them many times, and they're very frustrated and they want somebody to hear them. I couldn't reach it. President of Office doesn't do I didn't have that then. There is more than one of these members. There's 21 right now. Say BA, you see they've been getting involved in a lot of issues, and they've been coming to the meeting. So, quite each one of them will be able to provide that at that meeting Friday, the 22nd, in Gallup, at the Hilton Garden Inn. 10 o'clock go call. I audition and yes, and I is quite how I told here. Thank you a lot for listening. Here.
Last to guess the main thing is from the 18th to the 22nd, Navajo Nation Council Fall Session. A lot will depend on what is on the agenda, as well as how long the deliberations will take. we conclude on Thursday, we may be able to proceed to that meeting. Say what the and I guess so let's give us a little bit more background information and what the lines of funding that you'll be seeking within and from the Division of Social Services. Put it in a summary, 1 or 2 page summary, and then email it to the committee members. But that'll give us some upfront information on how to think things through as we proceed.
We'll do that and email them to you.
Oh, Hakushila. Committee members, do you have any other comments for this particular item? There are none, then we can proceed to receiving a report update from Division of Personnel Management. Tsui, Dr. Fowler, you have the teleconference floor.
Ike Hatche, Do Yat Eben, Honorable Delegate, Ado Shiyaj, Honorable Vice Chair, Ado Nanashana, Honorable Waninka, Ado Shiyaj, Honorable Paul Begay, Ado Honorable Charlene So, and then hopefully Honorable Helena will join us. Yat en hidadeshni wa anotso ala daisanotsa'i on behalf of the Division of Human Resources and Department of Personnel Management. We are to provide an overview regarding the American Rescue Plan Act, the amendment that was proposed as CJY 41-21, and there's a directive under Section 13, Directive C. We were to propose some amendments from the Naval Nation to the Naval Nation Personnel Policy Manual. And it's mainly focusing, it's not a huge amendment, it's very brief to facilitate the expediting the hiring. Just has ani lini dok as hit on need in the hot media. A cocodon human lini Miss Toddy. Aja a yego yinash ado DOJ just sato baka alwat. A co Asian Kodoyan hit hodolne. So before I give the floor to Miss Toddy, who extremely worked on amending some of these policies to expedite the process with the assistance of our DOJ as well. So I really want to thank her for acting on this as well. Ado Eya on Nido Monday, as you're all aware that we have not had a human resource director for quite some time. And as of Monday, we did hire a human resource director. I'll give her some time to introduce herself, if I may. Thomasita Woody Ajolia. Asian Kodo introduced the ordinate. Otto will hand it off to Ms. Toddy to go over the amendments, the proposed amendments that are being changed. Ashi Otto, I'm on another call at the same time, so he had to check it's Iso Shatina Anigi by Hansen. Otto, so at this time, if Ms. Woody, if you can introduce yourself briefly, and we'll hand it off to Ms. Toddy on the amendments. Ms. Woody? Ms. Woody? Ms. Toddy, I'll go ahead and give you the floor. We may have some technical difficulties. Ms. Toddy?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think I had it on the wrong one. Yat A, Shik Edo Shigune, she Thomasita Woody and she. What's what name? She dot kaba dash chain Kiani dash chain dot sitna Jenny dash Nale. Originally from Steamboat Canyon. I've been in human resources now for a little over 18 years, and hopefully we do some good here. And just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to work for the nation here. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Ms. Toddy, and your questions, we'll definitely catch up on a lot of those questions. Thank you.
Good morning, and honorable members of the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee. I will be presenting a few of the recommended changes to the Personnel Policies Manual pursuant to Resolution CJ 4121. The first amendment that I'll be covering is to Section 1, Personnel Policies. Before I begin, I did send copies of the information to Ms. Benali for distribution, and I did send one directly to Honorable Chair Daniel So, as well as Honorable Vice Chair Carl Slater. So I'm not sure if everyone has a copy of the information available.
Did you
Okay,
share
I'll go
that
ahead
with
and
the committee? And Ms. Toddy, yes, I did receive the one you sent me. Ms. Benali?
Mr. Chair, thank you. Ms. Toddy, when did you send it to me so I can forward it to everyone else who hasn't received it?
I sent it this morning, and also our HR director, Thomasita Woody, did send it under the name of Tommy Rose. I'm not sure if you were able to receive it. Her email address is a Gmail account, so it may have gone to Sendio.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. I don't see anything from that Gmail account.
Perhaps, I wasn't able to get onto my system, so I finally got on, and I believe that's the one that Honorable Chairperson So, as well as Vice Chair Slater received.
Okay, what is her email account? And then I'll send her a test email, and then I should be able to receive it after that.
Okay, it's Tommy Rose. It came at Tommy Rose. Yeah, that's TOMICITAROSE@gmail.com.
Okay, all right, let me try. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chair, this is Dr. Fowler, if I may, while you're getting the information. And I just want to let you all know that our Department of Personnel Management Office, we recently received some exposures from our personnel who tested positive. If you can keep in your prayers, So we're not in the office right now, so we did report it to the portal. So we're doing our best and our staff from DPM are doing their best and calling in right now, so we're not in the building. So just to let you all know, thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you for that information, and we do understand, and hope everybody tests negative.
All the gamblers gamble in Vegas.
I'm online now. I had to use. That development is not working for me. Yes.
Okay. Did we get the emails to the rest of the committee? So Honorable Slater, have you pulled up your copy?
No, I went everywhere. I went into the spam box, and I also just checked my regular email, and I have not seen anything from the email address that was identified.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Though,
Oh, well, Ms. Benali just sent something, so
Okay,
I see that
that's it.
now.
Thank you.
Ms. Benali.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the Health Committee, I was just going to let you know that I did forward Ms. Tommy Rose's Gmail and the attachment to the Health Committee along with Legislative Council. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready to proceed. Ms. Toddy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will begin with the first section, which is personnel policies. And the amendments are highlighted in blue, or they're in blue font. So the first amendment is to the Section D amendment, where it reads, these policies may be amended from time to time by the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee of the Navajo Nation Council at the recommendation of the Division of Human Resources, which includes the Department of Personnel Management. And we overstruck the word and continued with divisions of the executive and the legislative branch. So this one here is a minor change that we are recommending. Just to provide notice that there were at least 4 sections that were identified as recommendations for amendment. The second one is the recruitment section, which is section 4 in the Personnel Policies Manual, and the heading there is recruitment and selection. The policy is, in general, the Navajo Nation employment process will ensure competitive practices in recruitment, selection, and placement of qualified applicants based on the applicant's knowledge, skills, abilities, and overall qualifications for employment with the nation. The employment process shall comply with applicable laws of the Navajo Nation. There were no changes to this. However, I just wanted to point out what the policy of the Navajo Nation is. The Personnel Policy Manual that is being recommended for amendment currently apply only to the executive and legislative branches of the Navajo Nation. Under Section B, responsibilities, number 3, there are some changes where it now reads the executive, which is overstricken, and the new language is Division Director of the Division of Human Resources, and the language politically appointed is overstricken and replaced with respective division director as pertains to recruitment and selection jointly. A, may waive any policies under this section if the essential program services are being hampered by critical employment needs for a specific class or classes, provided that the waiver is not contrary to Navajo Nation law. New language, and with the exception of subsection E, qualification assessment of this section. B, may implement temporary and new language employment procedures. And C, shall ensure that employees hired under temporary employment new language procedures are selected on the basis of the criteria herein. And the reason for this change, again, is to expedite the hiring process. And we do have provisions for temporary employment, which means that the positions would still be advertised, and qualification assessments would be completed on the applications for temporary employment. So there were minor changes that were made to this section. Moving on to C, advertisement of vacant positions. Number 1, all vacant positions must be advertised for a minimum of 10 working days. Job vacancy announcements may be in-house, outside the Navajo Nation, or submitted to the Department of Personnel Management to be published on the, it used to be bi-weekly, but we've changed it to weekly job vacancy listing. We have programs that are requesting for immediate hire, so they're submitting their job vacancies on a daily basis. So we make those changes and we publish our job vacancy listings on a weekly basis and sometimes on a daily basis. Number 2, again, this is just for information. A job vacancy announcement is not required when a position is to be filled by A, departmental demotion of any employee, B, placement of a former Navajo employee with preference for re-employment, C, promotion or transfer of a qualified Navajo who is currently a regular status employee with the Navajo Nation. Number 3, to ensure compliance with applicable laws and policies, all in-house and outside job vacancy announcements require prior approval from the Department of Personnel Management before posting. We have had situations where programs would proceed with advertising positions with no notice to the Department of Personnel Management. And we'll find that they leave off the various preferences, which could be the Navajo Preference and Employment Act, the Veterans Preference, and also that the position is designated and the position will require a background check. So to ensure compliance with all of these preferences, we require that the program submit their job vacancy announcement to our office for review prior to posting the information. There have been situations where programs will advertise without that information, and usually the Office of Navajo Labor Relations will contact DPM and inform us of the discrepancies. Number 4, there is a change to this paragraph. Request 4 has been stricken through. Job vacancy announcement. We added the word announcement. Shall, and we deleted the word to and added the word shall be included on in-house, and we changed deleted the by, and it now reads weekly vacancy listings published by the Department of Personnel Management are to be submitted on the job vacancy announcement, and we inserted the word form, complete with all the required information. So we do have a standard form, which is a job vacancy announcement form that each program will complete and submit to our office for posting on our weekly vacancy listing. Number 5, the Department of Personnel Management may consider on a case-by-case basis other job vacancy announcement options, such as open recruitment and applicant pools to assist programs in filling positions. So currently, the Department of Personnel Management does maintain a pool of applicants that we can refer to the programs if they want to hire an individual immediately. And this could be for temporary employment pending the advertisement of the vacant position. Moving on to Section E, Qualification Assessment. The Department of Personnel Management or the approved department division shall conduct a qualification assessment on all applications received on or before the closing date specified on the job vacancy announcement. The qualification assessment is based on information provided on the employment application and other appropriate documents. In April of this year, the Department of Personnel Management transitioned the qualification assessment responsibilities to some of the divisions. And we did provide training, 2-day trainings to all the individuals that were identified to perform the qualification assessment for the respective divisions. However, there were some programs who requested that the qualification assessment process stay with the Department of Personnel Management because it was additional work for their staff, and they were unable to identify individuals to perform this duty and these duties and responsibilities. So even up to most recently, about a month ago, we did receive a request from the Emergency Medical Services Department to return the responsibility back to Department of Personnel Management. They were finding that the assessment process was getting to be too lengthy, and they had to wait for long periods of time for their qualified applicants. So the Department of Personnel Management took their responsibility back. We also are conducting assessments for the Department of Health, Department of Education, and the Office of the President, as well as the legislative branch. Okay, moving on, this is new language. Number 2, the qualification assessment shall be completed within 10 working days after the closing date, unless the position is advertised open until filled. Number 3, applicants assessed, or we struck the language, who have been determined not qualified, and inserted the language, assessed as not meeting the minimum qualifications may submit a written appeal to the DPM, that's new language, Human Resources Director, within 10 working days from the date of the non-qualified notice. So we do have an appeal process where one who was determined as not meeting the required minimum qualifications can appeal to the DPM Human Resources Department. And we have a certain number of days also to, within 10 days, to return a notice of whether or not the assessment is of not qualified would be upheld, or if the decision is reversed. Number 4, the result of the appeal shall be considered the final administrative decision. So these were the areas that were identified for amendment to expedite the hiring for the Fiscal Recovery Fund Office that is to be established under the Office of the President and Vice President. The next area is the Equivalency Clause, and this information is under Section 6, Classification of Positions. The policy reads, it is the policy of the Navajo Nation to establish and maintain a classification plan which groups jobs based upon similar duties, responsibilities, and qualifications. B, Equivalency Clause. To establish job descriptions, classifications, programs must, number 1, establish minimum qualifications for a position, whether a certain number of years of experience, a specific educational requirement, or both for qualification assessment. And number 2, establish preferred qualifications for a position, whether a certain number of years of experience, a specified educational requirement, or both, in seeking the best qualified candidate. Number 3 is new language. Certain positions, such as professional positions, are not eligible for an equivalency clause. We do have some positions which do not have an equivalency clause. One example is the accountant, also the attorney, and the civil engineers. These are just examples. The accountant position used to have an equivalency clause. However, there was a single audit performed on the Department of Public Safety, which included the audit of the Office of the Controller. And at the time, the findings was that we had a lot of individuals who did not have the required education, which was a bachelor's degree in accounting or a business administration degree. So the Division of Public Safety, as well as the Office of the Controller, were cited, and the qualification requirements for these positions were revised to delete the equivalency clause. So now our accountants do have, at the minimum, a bachelor's degree in accounting or business administration or finance. However, we still do have a few individuals that are employed with the Office of the Controller that do not have the required degree. However, in place of them not having the degree required, they were provided training by the accounting or the Office of the Controller. So we do have, I'm not sure of how many positions at this point in time, like in numbers of how many do not have an equivalency clause. Several years back, when Honorable Witherspoon was a council delegate, this section was amended, and it was this language was inserted to provide guidance to the programs when they're establishing the minimum and preferred qualifications for positions. The next section is the position classification plan. Number one, the purpose: to establish and classify positions by assigning official class titles, providing descriptions of duties and responsibilities, determining qualification requirements, and setting pay rates based on duties and responsibilities. Number two, modifications. Divisions, departments will coordinate with the Department of Personnel Management to modify the position classification plan through establishing new classes, revising or abolishing existing classes, setting new entry-level rates, and or related criteria as necessary. The final authority to modify the classification plan lies with the respective appointed division directors and executive director of the Division of Human Resources. Number three, coverage and exclusions. All positions, regardless of source of funding, are covered by the classification plan, except those designated as political, at-will, and temporary accounts. The Navajo Nation has three different types of funding source. One, general funds, two, external funds, and other, which is our proprietary and special revenue accounts. So, regardless of the type of funding, they would still be subject to these policies. The next section is classification of new positions. Number one, a position must be officially classified before a supervisor can take any personnel action with respect to employment, transfer, promotion, demotion, or salary. Number two, the Department of Personnel Management, in consultation with the division department, shall be responsible for evaluating and classifying each position to the appropriate class. Consideration will be given to the general duties, tasks, responsibilities, and qualification requirements. Number three, the approved class title as designated by Department of Personnel Management shall be utilized for all official records. Number four, the Department of Personnel Management shall be responsible for maintaining the official class specifications and will provide each program a set of relevant class specifications. We do have this information on our website under the class plan, and all this information is in alphabetical order. It does provide a copy of the class specification, the pay grade assigned, as well as the overtime code for each position. Moving on, E, reclassification of existing positions. A position is overstricken and replaced by the word shall be reclassified whenever a material and permanent change in the duties and responsibilities of the position occurs. Number 1, significant and permanent changes in the duties and responsibilities of the position must be reported to the Department of Personnel Management on the appropriate form. 2, a position must be officially reclassified before a supervisor can take any personnel action with respect to employment, transfer, promotion, demotion, or salary. The Department of Personnel Management shall be responsible for evaluating and reclassifying positions with the direction and authorization of the Executive Director of the Division of Human Resources. In this section, this Executive Director needs to be changed to Division Director.
Ms.
Okay,
Toddy,
and
Ms. Toddy, in that particular aspect, we still have a Department of Health. So Division / Department Director.
her title is still Division Director.
Dr. Jims? The Department of Health, not the Division of Health.
Okay. In that, if I can recall, I believe, Mr. Chair, I believe that the title is an executive director. So in those areas where it specifies division director, we could keep it as executive / division director. I'm not sure if Dr. Jim is on the line.
In that regard, Ms. Toddy, let's keep going since this is just a work session.
Okay.
And as we move forward, we can get that clarified. Thank you.
Okay. The next section that is being amended, although this is not related to the ARPA or the FRF office, is Section 9, Employee Benefits. And the change there would be under B, Paid Holidays. And the recommendation is to delete Navajo Nation Police Officer Day, which is the second Friday and Monday. There was clarification issued where it's now an observed holiday, but it is not a paid holiday of the Navajo Nation. So there was legislation issued regarding this, but we hadn't amended the policy manual. So I'd like to address that along with these other amendments. Okay, moving on. The next section that was identified for
Ms. Toddy, again, there would be consideration for the Indigenous Peoples Day, October 11th.
Okay, I'll go ahead and look out for that information, and before we present this for approval, then we'll insert it if there is legislation to include it as a paid holiday.
Okay, and moving forward with this amendment, then I guess include that.
Thank you. Okay, the next section is section 12, changes in assignment.
Throwing the frying pan.
Pardon me?
Go ahead, Ms. Hardy.
Go
The
ahead,
last,
Toddy. I think that was somebody that was unmuted.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The section would be section G, special assignment. A regular status of employee may be assigned to a special detail for not less than 30 days and not to exceed 180 calendar days when it is determined to be in the best interest of the Navajo Nation. The Department of Personnel Management, jointly with the executive, was overstricken and replaced with Division Director of the Division of Human Resources on a case-by-case will approve the special assignment. Number 1, a written request must be submitted to the Department of Personnel Management and shall include A, justification for the special assignment, the time period, and the expected result of the assignment. B, the assigned duties and responsibilities of the employee during the special assignment. C, reporting relationship and signature of the appropriate supervisors and the employee. Number 2, an employee on special assignment will not receive additional compensation. Number 3, upon completion of the special assignment, an employee will resume his/her regular duties. And the reason why the special assignment was identified as one section to be reviewed was because of the urgency, again, to fill these vacancies. And this was brought up as an option or an alternative to having to advertise the position, but to immediately fill the position. And since we do have, there is a possibility that they may assign a regular status employee from one of the respective divisions to fulfill the responsibilities of one of the proposed positions under the FRF office. So because we cannot assign a regular status employee to a temporary position, this one was identified. And in the last sentence, it does indicate that both the Department of Personnel Management and the Division of Human Resources can review these on a case-by-case and approve the special assignment. Currently, we do have a total of 235 proposed positions for the respective divisions and for the FRS office within the Office of the President and Vice President. However, these positions or the position information is still being reviewed by Department of Justice to determine whether or not they are they do meet the requirements of the FRF or the ARPA regulations. So we are at the Department of Personnel Management compiling this information and working with the respective divisions on their proposed positions. So that's the information that I have to present to you today in the work session. And I'm not sure if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Toddy. Committee members, do you have any questions? Committee members, any questions? For myself, since there are no questions from the committee, basically, initially it would be focus on how to get positions filled with the FRF office. And we don't make specific reference to that particular establishment. And I don't know how the committee would want to basically amend or establish specific rules for that particular office, since it may be a one-time action, or the committee could look at, okay, in all future short-term work, is this the process that would apply? That would be my overall initial thought. Ms. Toddy, what are your thoughts on it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I reviewed the personnel policies manual, I felt like the policies were in place to address immediate hiring, as well as the day-to-day hiring that we have for the entire, or for the executive and legislative branches. The only area I was concerned about was the special assignment. Again, we cannot put a regular status employee in a temporary account. Although there may be provisions to establish some temporary accounts, knowing that this funding is only going to be for 3 or 4 years. So consideration was also made to that. However, I feel like the policy does have the necessary provisions to fulfill whatever requirements are going to be made in the expeditious hiring of individuals for these positions. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I add?
Go ahead, Cecily.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Hardy. And I look at this policy more as also assisting with divisions and programs that have a whole lot of vacancies, and for us to start bringing people back on board. And we can evaluate it again the following year. If we have to amend them, we can amend them again. But this will really help us in filling a lot of these positions. As Ms. Toddy had indicated, we would like to continue working closely with each of the division and programs. We have one program that has a really high amount of vacancies, and we want to do our best in filling these positions. But again, it's not all up to DPM. We're trying to work and get information from each of the divisions to what they want to do with the positions. If they want to reclassify, we're open to that, but they need to do their part. And as far as abolishing a position, we want to get reasons why they're abolishing. So it really lays back with the divisions and programs. Another one, so the DPM te pansalada. But we don't want to make it too flexible, but we want to do the best that we can in continuing providing the services that we need and filling all these vacant positions. And with our new human resource director coming on board, We are looking at some of the better ways to bring on people and better ways to recruit. So so it should able to thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sila, okay. I guess in some of the, and as I caught some thoughts, I should have interrupted earlier on. I guess there was just some aspects that I jotted down. The weekly publication, since we are in a new age, perhaps the word could be inserted, will be posted. The other thought was the aspect of using temporary and looking at the aspect of short-term employment. Because we do, in this case, the FRF office may exist more than 5 years, even with the aspect that the monies is to be used to 2024, but there is that congressional latitude for extension. So that would be one thought. And I think the caveat was this 1.8 million that we put aside would be for the whole term that the FRF monies would be used. So in that aspect, perhaps temporary for me is less than a year. But since the office is going to be existing all the way into perhaps 2025, then maybe use the word short term. That would, and then going on, the aspect, certainly it's focused on the FRF, but the aspects of accounting for the Office of the Controller, of the requirement of an accounting degree. But there are other positions throughout the divisions, departments, and programs. We see a lot of openings for the various levels of accountants. Now, how do we best address that? And certainly that aspect of being able to get the best personnel to fill in these accounting roles at the particularly at, let's say, Division of Community Development, 110 chapters. There are a number of account maintenance specialists that are vacant, and it really puts the chapters at a disadvantage. And even at the agency service coordinators office, there are a serious need for accountants. And even within what we see with Division of Social Services, Department of Health, and General Services. Now, how do we, again, do we look at equivalency? A 2-year degree in accounting as a way to fill these positions. And then what I see and what was reported by the Office of the Prosecutor, I think there was 14 positions, and we only had 6 prosecutors. That may have changed in the weeks since. Is there the possibility to work in tribal court advocates into those positions? And then the other aspect that we looked at, of course, is the CHRs. And now I'm seeing vacancies in senior center managers. Now, how do we then also work in equivalency for those positions? I realize that we're looking at FRF, but since this particular document is before us, that's where I think we need to really look at. And then on the other end, where a transit driver has a CDL, but the wages are so low that the folks that have CDL don't even look in the direction of the Navajo Nation. How do we increase the salary so that we do fill these positions? Because as I understand it too, we have many vacancies in that program. Dr. Fowler, Ms. Toddy.
Yes, thank you, Shache. Really good questions. And I think those are some of the things that you not only are telling us today, though rather than staying focused on the FRF office, I think we also do need to share a plan with you of what are some of the next steps we're going to take in filling some of these positions. Again, we'd like to work with each of the division and programs during this, and we all didn't know that we're going to be in this pandemic. And I don't want to use a pandemic as an excuse, but if we were operating with only 2,000 plus employees during the pandemic, and maybe there's some of these positions that we don't need to where we're gonna abolish them. But then we want to employ our people. We want to bring them back and really embracing technology, making things more online, interviewing online. So those are all the things that we do need to do. And we also have what is called a personnel task force, and our personnel task force is reconvening tomorrow. And we are looking at, and I did share this with Ms. Toddy, and we are both in agreement that we're now in every 3 years, they do a study, and we are well aware that our salaries are not competitive. And we are looking at doing another salary study to where we realign all these positions to where our salary is more attractive. So we can even share those plans with you and with the committee. And we can say, these are some of the steps that we're taking in bringing some of our people back. Now, the other challenge we have on this too is if I were to bring people back, and we're experiencing this now, is that a lot of our people, when they come back, they don't want to move back with their families or their grandparents, and we don't have the infrastructure. And I think that some of the things that we really want to look at, I did make some recommendations to where if we really want to bring our people back to work here with our government, we really need to increase the infrastructure as far as building some apartment complexes to 1 or 2 bedroom to where we can really house them here. So ani o yugo bahnati kito o yugo shinst adolninde. You know, we'll do our best in providing some more updates on how we're going to fill a lot of these positions, and really it's going to take collaboration with each of the division and programs. And with bringing Ms. Woody on board and with Ms. Todd being on board, I think we do have a lot of work that still needs to be done, a lot of improvement that needs to happen. But we're willing to provide that update to you on how we plan to fill these, especially for some of the chapters. There's some reclassification that are needed with some ASC offices and some of them that are transitioning over. And those also take time, and we want to really take a look at some of those. How can we better provide a better system? If we're going to use equivalency or not, have you look at if we're going to use it, how it's going to look. If we're not going to use it, how it's going to look. You know, I think if we provide that, you'll have a better understanding. So, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Legislative Council, are you on the call? Star 6. Mr. Beta or Ms. Barbara? Miss Barbara?
Chair. She is the chair of Beta.
Hey, the Beta. Oh.
Good morning, Chair.
Hey, you have the teleconference floor. I need legal help.
Dana, Chief Legislative Counsel is going to call back in. Her phone is not connecting to the audio. So give her a few seconds. She'll be back on the call.
This is all what's the.
Quite office in the rad.
Okay, Sheila.
Hi, this is Miss Barbara. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Miss Barbara. Oh, good morning.
Great. Good morning. I apologize for the delay here. I don't know what was going on. I couldn't get on the line. So first I want to thank Division of Human Resources and DPM for looking into these issues and looking at their amendments. The one question I have is I was listening earlier, and they were talking about the fact that they had been meeting with programs and treating training division directors in doing assessments. My office, which is desperate, I can't even stress that enough, for to do some hiring, and we can't get applicants. Nobody's reached out to me. So I'm curious as to how involved the legislative programs were in any of these discussions. The other is, I noticed there is, now I can't find it, there is a way for division directors to do assessments, but they have to be approved to do that. So my question would be, how do you get approved to do that? Next, I'm curious, it looks to me under ARPA and FRS that there is the potential for offering sign-on bonuses, which might be really useful to our office. So I was curious if that was looked at. Also, I have another question. Certainly that last piece about housing, super important. And I was curious if it is allowable to say provide 30 days of some type of temporary housing if we hire somebody, because it does take a long time to find housing. And by temporary housing, I was curious if we could provide hotel rooms while people look for housing. So thank you, Chair. Those are just my first set of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bobroff. Dr. Fowler and Ms. Toddy. I guess the other is, my understanding, a lot of the paperwork. Submitting manually. And now that we have a lot of personnel that are on telework, how then do we amend the policies so that email documents will be part acceptable? Those are an aspect that I really think that we need to move forward on. The other is, when in other organizations, when a person is recruited, moving expenses and housing and incentives are part of getting an employee to a specific location. And then that, in line with this Bobroff's question, how can we amend the policies to afford a housing incentive? Whether it be, so that would be my follow-up also. Dr. Fowler, Ms. Toddy.
And thank you, Ms. Barbara. Thank you for your questions. Great questions, and these were some of the things that we have been looking into and really making sure that we are able to accept email, and we're also looking at going digital and having electronic signatures and so forth. And we want to communicate that not only with DPM, but with also with our Office of Controller, and go making things online, because that's that's where we're headed. And we just got to really embrace today's technology and really making things work. And, you know, if we were to put some moving expense on some of these individuals to as an incentive, you know, we're open to that too. You know, one of the things that we have to do prior is to include some of that within our budgets. And you know, and you are correct. We've been doing a lot of paperwork manually. And so we need to start moving forward in digitizing a lot of stuff. The signatures, we carry around PAFs back and forth, and that needs to stop. And we really want to move forward in making our Department of Personnel Management a processing center to where we want to make it more less cumbersome to everybody, especially our division and programs that are at agency office, rather than them driving out, sending a document over, and then finding out that there's one word wrong or missing. And you know, those are some of the things that we can work on. Chiche, the other questions that Dana had brought up, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to Ms. Toddy. Ms. Toddy, if you can respond to some of those questions. Thank you, Ms. Toddy.
Thank you. And Honorable Chair, in response to the questions that Dana posed regarding the approval to conduct qualification assessments, we did make that available to the division directors and also to the Office of the Speaker. And one of the requirements is that we train the staff that are identified to conduct the qualification assessments. We did not receive a response from the legislative branch. However, we are still open to that, and we can provide the training. As far as the sign-on bonuses, I know that there was discussion regarding that in some of the oversight committee meetings as well as NAVI. However, our office has not received anything, and we will go ahead and look into how this can be implemented for the Navajo Nation executive and legislative branches. With respect to incentives for housing, that is one of our major challenges here at the Navajo Nation. There is limited employee housing, and in some of the agency offices, there is no housing available. And that's one of the requests that we get a lot of times from some of the programs. And however, we don't have anything in place for that. As far as the moving expenses, there is a provision for that currently in the Personnel Policies Manual. And I believe they have to turn in 3 quotes, and the lowest quote is the one that the Navajo Nation will go with according to the Office of the Controller's requirement. So that is available. With respect to going paperless and to emailing documents, currently that is the process that the Department of Personnel Management is utilizing. They are accepting documents electronically. However, we have a few individuals that do not have access to computers, or their documents are too large to send via email. So we have been accepting a very limited number of hard copies, and our efforts to go paperless is in the works. And I did discuss that with our new Human Resources Director, Ms. Woody, earlier this morning. We did talk about the digital signatures that is available, and so she we will be discussing that and looking into that process. Mr. Chair, you also brought up issues regarding the equivalency clause. The majority of our positions do have an equivalency clause, such as the tribal court advocate, the CHR positions, the senior center supervisor position. So a lot of our positions do have an equivalency clause. So we do have that information that we share with those individuals that have been identified to conduct the qualification assessment. With respect to the wages for individuals or positions that require a CDL, I am aware that this was discussed in one of your sessions with the Division of General Services. And I did briefly speak to the division director regarding this information. So I'll go ahead and reach out to him on whether or not there is additional information or that they do have any information to submit to our office regarding the increases. A lot of our positions, such as the equipment operators, heavy equipment operators, the motor coach drivers do have CDL requirements. So this is something that we will also be looking at, as Dr. Fowler indicated, as a part of the salary study that we'll be discussing and proposing here in the near future. So I hope I answered all your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fowler and Ms. Toddy. Respective of the CDL drivers, operators, to maintain their CDL, they have to do an annual physical exam, and they do have to pass an annual drug test. So those are additional aspects to basically be they maintain their commercial driver's license. So that's one aspect I think that should be considered as part of being able to pay them a higher wage than what is currently in place. Again, I guess the main thought is get the word out that applications can be submitted by email, and then identify those folks that do the equivalency assessment. Make it available to those programs and the departments where that equivalency aspect exists, so that it is general public information. That's the part I can just see a employee at the senior center. I applied. They told me I wasn't qualified. End of story. But what if this person actually has an AA in culinary arts that would just enhance the service at a senior center? But they reached the dead end. So then how do we I guess, make it publicly known that there is this process that exists so that the folks don't reach this aspect that gives the negative attitude toward the Navajo Nation employment system. Thank you. Committee members, are there any other questions or discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd just like to comment on the last concerns you made regarding getting the work, that the applications are being accepted electronically. It is on our website, and the majority of the applications, or all the applications that we're receiving now, are coming in electronically, and we do have a website set up. It's the website is, or the email address is apply@dpm.navajo-nsn.org. The other is that in terms of the minimum qualifications for the positions, they are all, that information is contained on our job vacancy announcement. There is a link to each of the positions that are being advertised on our listing. And when they click on the title, the actual job vacancy announcement comes up, which contains a brief description of the duties and responsibilities, the minimum qualifications, which spells out any of the educational, the actual work experience, and if there is an equivalency clause. So all this information is already on our website. Thank you.
Up here is our storage tanks. The two
Committee
on the left.
members, anybody else?
Mr. Chair, this is Teresa Galvin with the Office of the President and Vice President. I'd like to respond on the earlier question you had regarding Department of Health Executive Director or Division Director position.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Galvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You had posed a question to Ms. Toddy regarding the status and distinguishment between Executive Director and Division Director. The Naval Department of Health had their plan of operation amended pursuant to HCSCJA-01-18. And when we look at the executive office for Dr. Jim that she currently holds, it is administered by an executive director. So I wanted to provide that notification to you for the question that you had earlier, Mr. Chair, and that'll guide Ms. Toddy as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Galvin. Are there anybody else on the call or on the Zoom that wishes to provide a question or a comment as we review this particular part of the personnel policies?
Chair, this is Delegate Slater.
Hey, Cecilia, you have the teleconference floor.
Thank you. been having some issues with my internet this morning, but I think I've caught most of the presentation. I reviewed the amendments and they seem pretty clear cut. Chair, when you were, I don't know who provoked the part of the conversation, but what prompted it. There was a question about placing regular status employees into temporary positions. And I was wondering if the presenters could reiterate some of the points there. And if there are issues they foresee with that, you know, people being reassigned temporarily for purposes of overseeing the fiscal relief funds or something to that effect, and how we're going to work around that. Thank you.
Dr. Fowler and Ms. Toddy.
Mr. Chair, this is Regina. I'll go ahead and provide the clarification. What I did mention was that one of the discussions included the possibility of assigning individuals to a special assignment to fulfill some of the duties and responsibilities with the FRS office. And the clarification that I provided is that if these positions were to be established as temporary positions, meaning one that only limited for a limited period of time, then that would create some issues because the policy, the current policy indicates that a regular status employee, which is a current Navajo Nation employee, could be assigned or placed on a special assignment, but they would have to go into another regular status assignment because our policy prohibits the placement of a regular status employee into a temporary position unless the employee themselves indicate that they want to resign from their regular position and go into a temporary. So that was one of the reasons why the special assignment provision was mentioned or brought up in this presentation. Again, the policy does not allow that, and I hope I clarified that for you, Delegate Slater. Thank you.
Sure.
Honorable Vice Chair Slater.
Thank you. I guess the second part of that question is, you know, are there conversations right now? Are there specific positions or areas that programs or DPM have envisioned where this might be an issue? Or is this just purely speculative?
Ms. Toddy?
Mr. Chair and Honorable Vice President or Vice Chair Slater, right now it's just information purposes, speculations. There's no specific identification that this is going to occur. Thank you.
Vice Chair Slater, do you have follow-up?
No, not this time, Chair. Like I said, I think what was presented in the Word document is pretty clear cut. And I guess I'll ask a question about electronic submittal of applications. Has DPM, I guess, considered how the electronic conversation, electronic submission could work aside from the email and faxing of applications? Is there an attempt to create a portal that be specific to the fiscal relief funds that could be tested out for future implementation across the government? And if that's not more efficient, then I guess I'd be interested to understand what are some of the issues in processing applications.
Thank you, Vice Chair Slater. And I guess when I first tried to broach that aspect, okay, an individual at the chapter house gets this application form, gets it, printed it, fills it out manually, and sends it. However, the system only allows the electronic filling out of the application. How do we get around that? Ms. Toddy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Vice Chairman Slater. With respect to the electronic submission, we do have a email address where all the applicants are emailing their applications. The only issue that we were having was with the electronic signature. However, the majority of the applicants have identified a way to insert their signatures, but we are talking about a digital process or the signature process, and we do have another department within the Division of Human Resources who is currently utilizing DocuSign to accept their online applications, which is the Navajo Department of Workforce Development. So we will be getting with that, their network specialists, identifying the best process to utilize. We are also working with the Department of Information Technology regarding portals and looking at SharePoint. There has been several discussions with our senior human resource analyst, as well as 2 other individuals that are assigned to handle IT issues. We do have online a fillable employment application where the applicants are able to fill that form out and submit it electronically. So I think the only issue that we were having with was with the faxing when we when some of the applicants were not aware of our email address where they could send it to, and they were sending like almost a ½ an inch thick employment packet, which by the time it got to us was not very legible, and we had to reach out to the applicant again to have them resubmit the information. So we are trying to work out the kinks with other IT experts that can help us in finding the best ways to submit our applications. And we have been testing the individual that has been working on that is our senior human resource analyst. And
there was no parking.
Call last week again from Department of Public Division of Public Safety, who is also looking at the SharePoint.
Sorry. Committee members, please put your phone on mute. Sounds like you guys are trying to park at buildings. Just kidding. Miss Toddy, go ahead.
Okay, so we are working with Department of Information Technology to try to get all the testing and the necessary programs for our office to accommodate the application submission process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Toddy. Okay. We still have a ways to go. Yes, Honorable Vice Chair Slater, go ahead.
Okay, I want to ask one other question, and that is, are there cumbersome processes that Human Resources or DPM has identified outside of, say, just the application submission process that could affect it? Just thinking about how our government runs and how much is actually conveyed, on a hard copy, like timesheets and other things. Are there opportunities that DPM and I guess DHR could lead to digitize some of those HR processes that are outside of just hiring and firing? I'm thinking about the payroll section specifically, if there's some way we could streamline that. And then, Chair, I guess on my last question, I know that you're able to submit the documents in an email, but I was just wondering if the program had considered, a portal or like a platform, a web application for submitting documents. So, your information would be retained and you could have an account, and then you could, automatically populate certain boxes of the application with your relevant experience if you're applying to, jobs across the Navajo Nation, and have a diverse skill set. So that's what I was asking about. I don't know how we could request the program to consider that, but I'd look to your guidance on that. Thank you.
Let me do this one real quick. Let me respond to this. I know what you're talking about. I just want to know about your practices.
Mr. Hardy?
This is Thomas Vita Woody. Is there an opportunity I can just answer maybe the question about the application process?
And it's with Honorable Slater's question, it reaches far into the payroll process also. So,
Okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Woody.
Okay, thank you, Honorable So and Honorable Vice Chair Slater. I know where you're coming with in terms of trying to streamline the application process, and other entities, aside from Navajo Nation, still does the paper process in applications, which is very time consuming. I understand that. One of the things that we can look at, and it's going to cost money, anything that you're putting on the table for the streamline is going to cost the organization money, and then time on top of that. And so, we have enough time to plan it, just like Dr. Fowler had mentioned. This committee that will be in review of this will have the opportunity to provide a sufficient review And so we can look at, not only the recruitment process, but the onboarding process. A lot of times these positions will require, people to have the necessary competence in those areas. And when you're looking at specific positions, it requires not only just the competence, but the education, the years of how many years these individuals have in terms of experience. So you want to recruit, you want to put these positions out there so that people can see them and apply for them. Most times it's not attractive when, somebody with highly skilled competence is going to brush off a position here with the nation when the salary is not competitive. So, and on top of that, it's like Dr. Fowler had mentioned that housing is a big issue. So when I look, and when anybody looks at the vacancy, it's telling, what's really happening. So those are areas that, that I will sit down with the HR team and go through and to address those concerns that you've pointed out, so that we have sufficient time to say, okay, and plan for it. Most organizations use what is called an applicant tracking system, or a platform, if you may, that will allow individuals to apply for positions. And then that information is inside the system itself. That in itself requires a lot of time and money, and for the organization to look at what is feasible and cost effective. So again, those are things that we can look at. Definitely we'll sit down with the human resources team and, have an overview of what's happening inside. That's basically the bottom line. And hopefully we can come back with some really good recommendations. And so that way we can have a better review and provide maybe some flow charts of what that really means. And then I'm a visual person. I have to see it in order to understand it. So this is my second day, and I hear you, and I definitely appreciate those points that you made. Thank you.
Chair, can I ask another question?
Yes, Honorable Vice Chair Slater, follow up.
Thank you. Well, I guess this would be more of a comment. During the annual budget process, the committee requested conditions on appropriations for, I think it was for DPM. I don't think it was for DHR. And it was to perform a housing survey of our workers, so we could get some data on how far they have to travel to get to work, what they would desire to see in housing development on Navajo that'd be responsive to their professional support, and then use this to help inform potential construction projects to get people back home or get them closer to their job sites, etc. And that was line item vetoed by the president. I guess this is your second day, so you weren't privy to all of that. Is it Ms. Woody? So I would really beseech the program and Shimla, Dr. Fowler, we need this sort of data to inform how we appropriate for housing projects, or how we try to bring in, outside developers to support this endeavor. And we just can't keep bringing up, oh, housing is a big need, and then not do anything toward that effort. So I'm a willing partner in this. I think the committee is a willing partner, and that's why we had asked for that condition on appropriation, was to try and be more holistic in our approach to hiring on Navajo, but it was line item vetoed by the president. And one of the things that we did this past year was clarify that the line item veto authority is only to budgetary matters, but it seems that in this budget, it was used for items outside of budgetary matters. That is a condition on appropriation, which is not a monetary, like fiscal amount of funding. It's not a budget line item that can be line item vetoed. So, you know, I'm coming, I think, on behalf of the committee, since we unanimously passed that, and, you know, this budget passed the Nomination Council with only, is it 2 or 3 dissenting votes? So there was a lot of support for the items in there, and that included this housing survey. I think the reason for the veto is the president said that it belonged to, or this was the responsibility of the housing program or something like that, which is not true. The information we were desiring was more holistic, and in the conversations we had during the budget process, they were more holistic. So if under your leadership, DPM can move forward and obtain this information, I think it'd be really valuable to the policymakers and the decision makers, the appropriators on council. So thank you.
Dr. Fowler, Patty, Miss Woody.
Yes,
Mr. Chair,
Chair, and Honorable Vice Chair Shiaj, on need of Noah. Dishi Bindit on behalf of DPM and then also DHR will work on it. You know, as we indicate, a lot of data is really important, I think, and it will support some of these things, and we'll provide some of that. And we'll work on it. We'll take a stab at it again, and with Miss Woody and Miss Toddy. So thank you, Vice Chair and Chair. Yeah.
Thank you. So does that conclude your presentation?
Yes.
yes, it does.
Go ahead, Ms. Toddy.
Mr. Chair, this will conclude our presentation, and we thank you for your time as well as the comments and questions. And I hope that we were able to answer all of your questions and concerns. Thank you.
Priscilla, I guess the main thing then the committee would be looking for is some of the changes, and then how, I guess the main thing is how do we get out the word of how the Navajo Nation population has information on how to apply. Again, just looking at what we learned with school systems, not everybody has access to the internet, and so they may have to go to the chapter house, a senior center, a Head Start center, or even a local school, or even a Staples place to get an application submitted and then to do all the necessary items. And the other part that I feel that was left unanswered, who does the assessments within each division or program, or whether it is going to be Miss Woody. as far as the equivalency assessment. That was left unanswered, and so if it falls on the division, then let's work on someone within the division. If it falls on DPM, then let's make that particular person do presentations to the respective divisions so that the end result is we filled some of these highly essential positions. One in the service delivery through the CHR program, through the other positions that Ms. Toddy identified. That would be the aspect that we need to proceed on. Overall, thank you for the presentation. And there were folks on the call that listened, and I think everybody has a better idea of how we can best proceed forward. And for all the folks on the call, again, the committee is not all knowing. We aren't all knowledgeable. So we need this best effort from everybody to make the hiring process, the evaluation, the assessment process to where it is understandable and it is an aspect that is usable. Thank you. That committee members, if there's no follow-up questions, then we will move on. Miss Patricia Ghani, Mr. Matthew So, Mr. Derek Franklin, are you on the call?
Chair Solana.
Hey, Snas, where you been?
I guess I've been on star 6 all this time. I got told I was not being heard. I've been trying to get on since Mrs. I'm trying to get on. I'm in another meeting. I'm sorry. I was trying to get on earlier, and I had questions. I had several questions, but now they got answered through the conversation. So I just want to let you know that I am on. I've been listening, and if I come up with any more questions here that I need to find out answers to, I will jump on again. Maybe I won't be on star 6 this time. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Holono, thank you. So, Ms. Patricia Ghani, Mr. Matthew So, Mr. Derek Franklin. An update from Department of Education.
Yeah, all the time I was talking.
Okay, then let's go to Department of Health, Dr. Jill Jim.
Huh? I said my piece, yeah, but I didn't. They answered all my questions.
Alona, put yourself back on star 6. Up to Jill Jim.
Okay, put us on mute.
Okay, let's go to the Division of Social Services. Miss Deanna Neswit-Gishi.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Health, Education, Human Services Committee. This is Deanna Neswit-Gishi. I will be doing an update on the Naval Family Assistance Services. And then we also have to provide an update that Ms. Regina Yazi, Department Manager for Department of Family Services, will provide.
Thank you. You have the teleconference floor, Ms. Neswit-Gishi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I had provided a written 2-page summary for the committee titled Naval Family Assistance Services. Mr. Chair, have you and the committee members received it?
I received it.
Okay, thank you. So it was just a brief outline of the request for the committee for a work session. I had just indicated presentation by the Naval Family Assistance Services. So I just provided a brief overview of the 5 services provided by the Naval Family Assistance Services. But Mr. Chair, before I proceed, I'd like to announce that we do have a new supervisor for the Naval Family Assistance Services. It is Ms. Rayanne Mateba. Ms. Mateba, would you like to do a brief introduction?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm hoping you guys can all hear me. I see my microphone going green here. But good afternoon, honorable chair members. I just would like to briefly introduce myself. My name is Riya Matiba. I just briefly started with this, recently started with this position 3 weeks ago. So I'm jumping in with as much knowledge as I can and trying to get through with everything that this program is providing assistance to all of our Navajo families. So I just want to, like I said, briefly introduce myself in that manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Rayanne. So Mr. Chair, what Ms. Mateba did not further elaborate, she was the senior accountant with the Department of Child Care and Development. So she moved over as a promotion into our program for Department Naval Family Assistance Services. So Mr. Chair and members of the Health, Education, Human Services Committee, I'm not going to read the report fully, but just indicate that the 5 services that are provided is general assistance, burial assistance, low-income home energy assistance program, Naval school clothing and school supplies, as well as the community service block grant. So in the summer of 2019, we did have the Naval Family Assistance Services move under the auspices of Department for Self-Reliance to help assist with Naval Family Assistance Services to start the process of going paperless, as well as doing electronic payments to families using a case management database, and to also track and to make sure there is no duplication of payments to individuals, and that we can get real-time, on-time data. And so we did update our plan of operations in January 2020. That was accepted by the committee. And so that's what we have been moving forward with. So since then, the pandemic had occurred, and at that time, the Naval Family Assistance Services started to expand with more services. We started to get CARES Act funding, and now we're receiving the ARPA funding with financial, and it has grown significantly. So we will be moving forward with the committee to revise and update our plan of operation to have Naval Family Assistance Services as a separate standalone program. So we will be forwarding that. We did have it initially presented to the committee a few months ago, but at that time we had it withdrawn, and so we're revisiting that. So that will be coming forward, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. The other thing is that there are currently 10 employees only within the NFAS. They did have 5 employees who did take advantage of the enhanced retirement program. And so they are moving forward. We do have positions that have been advertised, and interviews will be occurring this coming Friday. And I do see that there was another senior caseworker position on the advertisement as of this morning. So with Ms. Mateba's leadership, they will proceed to start filling those vacancies so she can have a full team. There are also 10 field offices that provide the 5 mentioned services in the beginning of my presentation. We also provided the funding sources for Naval Family Assistance Services. As you can see, there's school clothing, the Community Service Block Grant Administration direct funding, as well as the CARES funding. We also have the LIHEAP CARES, the regular LIHEAP block grant, as well as the LIHEAP ARPA funding. We also received 638 funding, which is for GA, general assistance, as well as burial assistance. And so those are the updates on the funding source. Right now, payments for the Naval Family Assistance Services customers are processed through a system that was called Justware, which we are going to start phasing out. We no longer have that available. We also have been working closely with Office of the Controller to do data port processing. We're doing that right now with school clothing. We also use the old-fashioned request for direct payment.
Power on.
And so with the processing of payments, that's something that we would like to go forward with. Just updates with the Naval Family Assistance. They did expend $733,249 for the CARES LIHEAP funding, and that was for direct assistance. For the Naval School clothing, we did have for the FY 2020 school clothing, there was a glitch with at the end of 2020 where the funds were not processed timely. And so we started the fiscal year of 2021 with a small budget of over 200,000. And so as listed in my report, in July, Office of the Controller replenished those funds, which we had requested. This is when Mrs. Roxanne Gorman was overseeing or providing that guidance for NFAS at that time. So we did not expend our full allocation for school clothing when the funds were just given to us in July 2021. We were able to assist 2,002 children at that point. And so, Mr. Chair, we will be going forward with the committee. We are going to be working with a sponsor to request that those funds that were not spent for school clothing be carried over back into school clothing. That amendment will be coming forth possibly after the council meets next week. Also with the Naval Family Assistance, we assisted through the Public Law 93-638 burial assistance, $1,584,811. We also had the within the Office of the Executive Director, we provided the Naval Nation COVID-19 burial assistance in the amount of $4,097,794 for 1,418 decedents. Those funding was provided. Thank you, delegates, for accepting our request to get $2 million from the UUFB for the nomination COVID-19 burial assistance. The difference with that COVID-19 and the 638 COVID-19 is that the nomination COVID-19 assisted any Navajo individual who had passed due to COVID-19. Income and residency was not an eligibility requirement, so we were able to assist many Navajo families living on and off the Navajo Nation. And for the 638 COVID-19 and regular burial assistance, there are eligibility requirements where you have to have residency on the Navajo Nation. You have to be considered indigent, meaning that you have no income to pay for your resources. So it's a lengthier process. Again, that's Public Law 93-638 funding. And so we are working with the FRF team to see how that can be reverted back so that it can replenish the 2 million. So we are working with DOJ to review our request to have those funds returned back to the Navajo Nation. Again, we are going to make that additional request to have those funds reverted back, because those funds, they were not, that 2 million was not fully utilized. And so we do have incoming requests for that ongoing assistance. And again, we will be working with a delegate for sponsorship in that area. And so we do have our 5-year BIA Public Law 93-638 contract was approved for general assistance and burial assistance. So that is started January 1st, 2021, and that will carry us to December 31st, 2025. The Navajo Department of Justice has reviewed our general assistance and burial assistance policy manual, and they determined it's legally sufficient. It was submitted for sponsorship since December 9, 2020. We will have to bring that back up so that we can have up-to-date current policies. We are working with our communication managers, Ms. Delilah Goodluck. We did put some indication of outreach and communication media release on this form. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Neswit-Gishi. Committee members, question. Committee members, any questions, comments?
Sure.
Honorable Vice Chair Slater, go ahead.
First, thank you for the report. And I think the committee, or I myself, would appreciate a copy of the budget expenditure reports for the external grants from CARES, CARES 2, ARPA, any other recent large dollar fundings that have come to the division. And then second, the committee supported a carryover amendment at Navajo Nation Council for one-time grants to our domestic violence shelters. I was wondering how the carryover budget process is going right now in developing that, and what the total amount will be, and if the committee could have an opportunity to participate in crafting those grants. And then third, I don't know if you're able to offer it at this time, but be interested to get an update on Utah Navajo healthcare systems running of the Gentle Ironhawk shelter, and what successes or issues the division is or has seen there with them taking over operation of the shelter. And then lastly, I think we only have one Navajo Nation shelter right now, and that's in Shiprock. Be interested to hear how they're doing presently, if there are any recent issues that the committee should be made aware of with that shelter. So thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Slater. Ms. Neswit-Gishi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Honorable Delegate Slater, for your questions. So our response, we did complete our quarterly report. And so we do have our quarterly report, the QRF that is available. Our accountant, Brenda Associate, did prepare the one specifically for Naval Family Assistance Services on the report that I just gave. So we do have that available that can be forwarded to Angelita as well. Regarding the Amendment 1 for the fiscal year general fund 2022, The Amendment 1 had indicated that all of the funds for our 3 general funded budgets, 11-7001, 11-7022, and 11-7008, which is school clothing, that all of those, whatever carryover amounts, would be forwarded to the domestic violence shelters. 50% of that is going to the shelters, contracted shelters we have on Navajo Nation. The other 50% is to be given to the shelters that we have contracts off Navajo Nation. Honorable Chair Slater, we have not moved forward with that, and as I presented my in my report a little bit earlier, we are going to have a request with legislation to see how we can look at possibly just having the Navajo Family Services, which do oversee the shelters, whatever carryover amounts they have, to go towards the domestic violence shelters since it's under their purview. But the request for the Naval school clothing carryovers to remain with Naval school clothing, and then for any carryovers for the executive office to go towards the burial assistance. So that's what we are hoping to meet with on. We're hoping on Monday, but that did not happen. So Honorable Slater, that's the discussion that we can have moving forward. Regarding the Utah Gentle Ironhawk shelter, I do not have information, Honorable Slater, so that's something that we can get and send a report to the committee. And then lastly, the question on the Navajo Nation shelter, which is overseen by the Department of Family Services. I'd like to defer that question to Regina Yazi to respond to. I do not directly oversee the shelter in Shiprock. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regina, are you able to provide a response for the shelter in Shiprock?
Yes, hello. This is Regina Yazi, Department Manager for Department of Family Service. Thank you for this opportunity and giving me the time. Yes, regarding the Shiprock shelter, as of last week, I did receive just a status report that they were at full capacity with 4 families in the shelter, and everyone was doing well. Each of the 4 families had infant children with them, so it was quite busy in terms of the staff and the overall shelter operations. So that's as far as I know in terms of the shelter being in full operations and at full capacity as of last week. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Slater, do you have follow-up?
I guess I'd just say at this time, I'm not supportive of the request for legislation. I think the committee and the council spoke pretty clearly when we passed the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Slater. Ms. Neswit-Gishi and Ms. Yazi. Previously the Shiprock shelter, we had staff that had experienced COVID, and it also the clients. And have we changed protocols so that these new clients, I don't know if they're in there, that they've tested positive, or so could you relay information to the committee respective of that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Regina Yazi. I can answer that. Yes, thank you, committee members and Mr. Chair. As of today, there are no reports of any COVID positive exposure in the shelter, and none since that last incident of 2020. And up to date, yes, there are procedures where any new any new families,
on a
individuals
conference
that
call.
will be admitted will be
Yeah, so
tested
that's
in
what I'm
terms
doing.
of ensuring that
Oh, I haven't bothered with it yet.
Miss Yazi, sorry for the interruption, but whoever's on the call, please mute your phone. I don't think the committee caught the last part of your statement, Miss Yazi. Miss Yazi, could you repeat?
If Ms. Yazi could press *6, that would bring her back into the conversation.
Okay, I pressed *6. Okay, yes. So as of today, the shelter, there is no reports of positive COVID residents in the shelter. And also, the procedures are that the employees, the staff there, do ensure that any resident coming into the facility are not COVID positive and are vaccinated. They have a temperature check, they ask questions, they do a pre-screening, and then they also screen as they leave the shelter to ensure that they are not COVID positive as they leave the shelter to either go to another safe home or to be released to a home environment. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Yazi. Committee members, anybody else? Ms. Neswit Gishi, Ms. Yazi, will the division be pursuing ARPA funds related to shelters?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Health, Education, Human Services Committee. We do have 3 proposed projects utilizing the ARPA funding that the Navajo Nation has received. They are currently being under review by Department of Justice.
Please share with the committee the purpose of those, the usage of those funds.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Health, Education, Human Services Committee. There are 3 projects. One of them proposed is for the electronic telework project, how we will be able to provide more services to families so that we can continue to provide services to not place the workers or the families in a situation where we can access their data, just being out utilizing the database system. The second one is proposed is for like a campus style office. Right now we have we have more than 56 offices. And so when we're trying to look at this COVID-19, we have families having to not receive wraparound services from the 6 different departments and services. so that we would have office locations in 7 areas so that families who come in for any type of social services do not have to travel 30 miles one direction for TANF benefits and 40 miles another direction for childcare services, and that we can fully work with the families in one location and just have walk the individuals across the street or across the walkway so that they can receive services. Right now, we have our offices are overcrowded. We have staff that are sharing offices. And so when we talk about this COVID-19, we need to start looking at how we can have adequate spacing for all of our employees. And the third request is for Navajo school clothing. That has been going quite well right now. We do have a web portal on our Division of Social Services website. And so we have received more than 4,000 applications just on the web portal. And then we also have the individuals dropping off school clothing applications or faxing them in, as well as mailing them in or walking into our office to drop them off. And that was the third project. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Ms. Neswit-Gishi, does that involve construction monies?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. We are working with Mr. Tim Wolf from the Dibble Company on those areas. As far as, I believe it's not going to be new construction. It may be proposed to have maybe modular buildings in that area. So, Mr. Chair, that's not my area of expertise, and that's where we're working with Mr. Wolf on these projects. Thank you.
The question in the Family Assistance Services. The 638 burial assistance.
The non-disclosure.
That was at 3,500, am I correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. So the 3,500 initially started from the 638. They had the regular burial assistance in the amount of 2,500. And so the BIA, I guess at that time, determined that it did cost more for the decedents to need additional services. So they did raise the amount for 638 only for COVID-19 to 3,500. And so this is where, again, the criteria of residency, having no resources or income to pay for the final expenses is where it's very stringent. And so that's where, when we worked with having the Navajo Nation COVID-19 burial assistance, the same amount was utilized, but it was open to any Navajo who had passed due to COVID-19. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Neswit-Gishi. I have personal knowledge where families who have relatives that passed as a result of COVID-19. The information that was transmitted to them, there is a backlog of 2 weeks. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, thank you for that question. What normally occurs is the family works with the Navajo Nation COVID-19 burial assistance. The families work directly with the mortuary of their choice. And so the mortuary has the family complete a 1-page application. and they submit a copy of the certificate Indian blood, as well as notation that the death was related to COVID-19. And then they submit an invoice to us. So once we receive that, and the 3 documents are attached, then that's where it moves forward for payment. Now with the public law 93-638 burial assistance, they have, it's a more, as I mentioned earlier, more stringent process that the family has to have a family representative be as the applicant. And that's where they have to have more documentation. They have to complete a different application. They have to bring in documentation for income for the decedent. They have to bring in documentation to show proof of residency. And so that process takes a little bit more time. And once it has occurred, that everything's in place, and then that they go through payment using a receiving record. So maybe that's where there's discussion about delay. And this is where the proposed burial assistance and general assistance policies that have been proposed since December 2020, we will revisit that because I think that was going to be a more streamlined process, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Nesbitt Yazi. Committee members, any other questions?
Chair.
Cecilia, Honorable Vice Chair Slater.
Thank you. I guess I would just like to the DSS report for an update on how things are going over at Gentle Ironhawk. So that's all I just wanted to share. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Slater. And we will, in addition, we will make that request to Utah Navajo Healthcare Systems. Going forward, I guess the main aspect is the delivery of services. The other aspect that I just now remembered is the follow-up. Basically, what the committee found out with the placement of elderly constituents placed in homes that are off reservation. Most significant is the one where we heard about the campus of care. Has our social workers done follow-up on the elderly care case? I think the committee previously heard there's a number of those type of situations that exist on or near the border towns. Have we basically followed up on their care and the situations that our Navajo citizens face? Ms. Nesbitt Yazi?
Mr. Chair, this is Regina Yazi. I can answer that.
Go ahead, Ms. Yazi.
Okay. Thank you for this opportunity again, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Regarding the elderly care services, off reservation or border town areas, yes, our social workers, caseworkers at our field offices who do those placements in those subcontracted facilities, they are required, and they do follow-ups with the facility and the client on a monthly basis in terms of placements that they make. In addition to that, the Arizona Long-Term Care Services, ALTECs, caseworkers also are required to do monthly follow-up monitoring with the facility as well. They conduct their own case management services as it relates to Arizona, the state of Arizona access, eligibility for those clients through their Arizona access portal websites, case management procedures. So yes, in both areas, for the DFS field staff and also for the ALTECs case workers. Mr. Chair. And also, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I did submit a written report this morning to Angelita. Let me just also point out that it appears in reviewing that I had inadvertently left out some additional vendor information. I had just included just the 6 instead of the overall 14 of the memorandum of agreements that we have regarding our subcontracts with adult care services. So I listed 6 on the report, but there's a total of 14, Mr. Chair. And I will send an amended report by today.
Thank you, Ms. Yazi. Committee members, any other questions? Okay, Ms. Neswood Gishu. There was, I'm aware of that there was a notice of concern for children that were placed in a facility in the city of Farmington. And there was concern about their care and the response from that particular facility. And as a result, the concern was also transmitted to the state of New Mexico as a question of jurisdiction had come in to play. Ms. Neswood Gishi, how is the division addressing similar aspects? Number one, when a social worker not within the Navajo Nation government has Navajo children, placed in facilities perhaps where there is no contract with that particular facility. I think there was, it also invoked a question on whether it would be an ICWA matter. Ms. Neswood Gishi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Health, Education, Human Services Committee. So in that one particular case from Farmington, the children were placed in that facility in Farmington that we do not have contracts with. We did not make placement of the children in that facility. And so through the state, I did do a call and made a report of the concern that the workers had in that facility. So from there, the states do not provide the information back. They did send an officer over to do a welfare check of the child. Again, we didn't have any names. It was just reported it was a Navajo child. And so the state handles those cases. So we do have intergovernmental agreements with Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah that's current still in place. And in regards to the Indian Child Welfare Act, when the state detains any child, and if they're going to maintain legal custody of the child, and the child is Native, they're required to reach out to that respective tribe to intervene in the case. Now, if the family decides to work with the state and voluntarily place their child with another relative or in a facility, that at that time, they do not notify the Navajo Nation because they're working with the family collaboratively. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I guess the main aspect is with this particular case that opened lines of communication. And I see that as a positive aspect. Committee members, any other follow-up questions? This morning, the very first item on our work session, we had the Mr. Wayne Claw basically invite the committee to a meeting of certain members of a independent service providers. And they're
It'd be better for them to do that because then they don't assume that a liability right away, and they give that.
And so they're meeting Friday, October 22 at 10 a.m. in Gallup at the Hilton Garden Inn. And specifically, they really want to establish a way to coordinate with the Division of Social Services, with the Division of Health, and other appropriate programs and departments so that they are basically wanting a way to, I guess, align themselves so that they get the necessary funding to operate their programs. And so if the council adjourns before the 22nd, the committee will attend, and we'd appreciate representatives from the Division of Social Services to also attend so that we may be there to offer guidance, to answer their questions, and establish a rapport with the independent service providers. Ms. Gishi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Health, Education, and Human Services Committee. Yes, I was on the call since 10 a.m. and I did hear Mr. Wayne Claw expressed some concerns. That is the first I did hear of the independent service providers having comments. I did meet with our team, Regina Yazi and Rhonda Jishi, who oversees she's the contract analyst. They have not been informed of any concerns, which Mr. Claw had alluded to. So we will be reaching out to the service providers that we have contracts with to have them provide information so that we can be prepared for the meeting with them next Friday, so that we can continue with the dialogue we have with the service providers that we have contracts with. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Deswit-Gishi. Committee members, do we have additional comments or discussion? Again, we will await answers on how to proceed with the Gentle Ironhawk funding aspect. I guess the one aspect was the Utah funding, where the nation had the funds, but reverted, 2 years of funding back to the state of Utah. Now, how do we facilitate that third year to go to the Gentle Ironhawk facility? That would be one of the most specific items that Honorable Carl Slater related to.
Mr. Chair, may I provide an update on that?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So that was a 2-year grant, and the 2 years did expire. So Utah Naval Health System did apply on their own behalf, and they did receive that funding directly through Utah VOCA. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions, comments? If not, Ms. Gishi, Ms. Yazi, and all the staff from the Division of Social Services, thank you for availing yourselves to this teleconference work session. We appreciate your attendance, and we'll go forward from there. Thank you. Next up, I'd like to call on Department of Diné Education, Ms. Patricia Ghani, and Mr. Derek Franklin and Mr. Matthew So. Oh, yeah, there she is.
Members of Health, Education, Human Services Committee. From Department of Diné Education. Agenda. Department of Head Start. Update. I also just wanted to extend my apologies. I was fumbling with my device to unmute when you first initially called on Department of Diné Education. Pat Ghani Initiado, Acting Superintendent Department of Diné Education. Health Education Human Services Committee.
Yes, I'm here to see Colin Largo.
Okay. No paper call for for updates. So Chairman So, I yield the time back to you, and I will follow your lead in terms of the points that you would like an update on, and we will do our best to provide as much context to your request today.
Thank you, Yazi, Ms. Ghani. Number one.
Hello. Good to see Colin.
Number one is the status on. There was still some outstanding issues with Department of Head Start's response on the cap to the Auditor General, and have those been clarified? And so then has the Navajo Board of Education accepted those and approved them? Because it will require committee action, and it will require budget and finance action regarding the cap to the audit findings. Ms. Ghani.
Thank you for those questions, Chairman So. So indeed, there was a request for a performance audit of Navajo Head Start. A couple of them, actually. One that was initiated by then Council Delegate Jonathan Hale in fiscal year 2017, and subsequently in year 2018 as well. And so we were able to help see through the finalization of that performance audit report with the help of Auditor General Helen Brown. And since that report has been completed, it's been shared with Board of Education members and also yourselves, the Oversight Committee of Health, Education, Human Services. And due to the 20 findings within that report, the expectation from Auditor General Brown was to have Head Start compile a comprehensive corrective action plan. And it took us some time to complete that. And we are grateful for Auditor General's office to receive these changes of the corrective action plan in numerous exchanges. The team submitted it, received feedback, and the Head Start leadership team did incorporate the suggestions. And so the final product was actually accepted by Auditor General's office. And as is process, we also brought the corrective action plan before the Navajo Nation Board of Education for their approval as well. And for the past 4 weeks or so, I have seen communication from Auditor General Brown reaching out to Delegate Slater and yourself, sir, Chairman So, for sponsorship of the in which HES would hear and entertain and for a favorable approval of the corrective action plan. So that is where that process is at, where the Head Start performance audit corrective action plan is concerned. So, sir, I hope that provides the context for you and Health, Education, Human Services Committee as to where that item is and what next step we can do to move along the product.
Star 6. Thank you, Kiela, Ms. Ghani. Gosh, there's so many audits going. Let me see. Can't remember if I asked Auditor General staff to put it in an envelope and deliver it to Council Delegate's office. Miss Angelita Benali, could you reach out to Auditor General, Miss Helen Brown? While that happens,
Okay.
Ms. Ronnie, this is respective of the reauthorization. And I think there was 12 schools. Mr. Derek Franklin had presented the authorization that are due for the schools, and all of them had presented their audits except for one. Is Mr. Franklin on the call? If he isn't, then perhaps you have the information. Did not Jean Ultra present their audit?
Thank you again, Chairman. So, aro a ultrat nas niligo e kodo belan nada itle ultrat de jehi jigi ko ani de quishin ultrat hot kodo ni hidato ninit e for the past summer, June 2021 do wishte ado the school who had difficulty in obtaining its audit report from its vendor. See, schools are responsible for securing their firms to conduct their fiscal single-year audits. And for whatever reason, not Jean,
Okay, I just got on their Zoom meeting, so that must be
not
what it is.
timely
Okay.
in its submission of the single-year audit for the school. And which resulted in a number of short-term reauthorizations of the school. And so just this last time, last Thursday, our governing board, Navajo Nation Board of Education, EJ, and at that time we were able to have the presentation made by Nutnell Jean School, and they finally were in receipt of their audit report. Called reauthorization. Department of the Net Education student achievement the second prong that relates to consideration by the board for reauthorization of schools pertains to the audit. So in this instance, it is incumbent upon the school to act early in terms of securing a reliable firm to conduct the audit. Is the Yego auditor chot ego is has unidis kid ado dinal sos bitadet is to wishte da nile So it is very time consuming and it can take a while. So a lot of our schools, they start securing their auditor clear in September and October. November there is a timeline that we have our schools work towards. The clearinghouse, the audit, the final audit report has to travel to the clearinghouse. And that is always the last day in March. Especially for those schools that are preparing for reauthorization consideration by the board. In this instance, audit results obtained earlier. Reauthorize. So what we have to do is work with BIE as well. By virtue that our BIE funded schools BIE federal money disallowed cost or some material weaknesses corrective action Department of the because those are some of the reasons and explanations for the 3-month reauthorization of Nutnelgene schools. I hope that answers the question and concern that you bring to our attention.
Katla, Miss Ghani. Again, the main thing is the requirements that are established by the Public Law 100-297. Regarding the, in years former, it was called annual yearly progress, respective of the student performance. Is there, again, like with the audit, a clearinghouse, or is there an entity where all this student performance data is housed at? And does the nation receive those reports?
Thank you.
Question,
Shaja'ah. Adequate yearly progress of schools.
So what? Auto within BIE. Just this data.
Yes. Thank you for that question. In the system that BIE utilizes, AD 66 schools BIE funded BIE operated. Such tribal control grant schools, and they're all BIE funded schools. There are regulatory requirements attached. And D title funds jihin dahigi yisi Title 1. AD ilchina ohos ahigi aja yisi yedes es. The ultratnas niligo on an annual basis on nahachapik The khatail trapich hol May 30th. All of our schools are expected to submit a school improvement plan. Yisne. A beat nahas zohle. Is it the qui ya beso hindal ta di ultra sa anigi bich dead at end that be hit zohle. Ado ya di school improvement plan yisnigi naas ka comprehensive needs assessment big echo. Anle hol jishna de quina khait china ohol ad kwa ultra igi. What are the trends? What are the patterns? And what are the identified root causes? Halet di china ohol ahigi but what ela ho hait ebel not on nishti beso chi don inligi at what benahast bihes zohle. Because on an annual basis, our schools have a plan as to how they will expense their total school funds. And Title I specifically addresses student achievement. And expectantly, our leaders create a plan with identified goals. Goals that are measurable, goals that they can realistically work towards and achieve on an annual basis. For example, if it is determined that a certain percentage of students will need to make improvements to reach proficiency within their respective grade level standard, it's measurable. So when the students take the examination in that spring of the school year, a school can determine whether they are on the path toward reaching their goal. And in the impending year, when they are fashioning their new plan, they can make adjustments. And so, unfortunately, we don't obtain copies of those school improvement plans as it is today. We do, however, have our schools submit their test data. Program, Office of Education Research and Statistics, reauthorization. In the future, however, I think it's important to convey to our colleagues from BIE Ado D school plans ninigi nihido latob beat the need ain't or lesigi. I hope that we can actualize that in the near future so that we can have a closer collaborative working relationship so that we can improve student outcomes. Abba ehonil zinigi di ultatnaz niligo bakadi jahigi yisi be ehozin school improvement plan yisninigi. And so we have made some changes within AD reauthorization. We have scribed through a template what we want the schools to prepare to present to the board. And much of it, includes the student achievement data so that we can have our school leaders articulate and share with our Board of Education members, that they have thought through this plan, and if the root cause is the need for capacity building with teaching staffs, then we want to be able to see that there is sustainable professional development that is also included as well. At end that jadi beso a ajet ohot ajhidet ahigi laintaj itahidet beso kon hachniya kedet nan dehigit. Oh, you know, it raises a question how these funds are being utilized. So we want to be included in that conversation, the receipt, the approval of those school improvement plans. At this point. So I hope that answers your issues and concerns this afternoon and the question that you pose, Shajaa.
Thank you, Mrs. Goni. Again, could we, the data that is received by Department of Education, again, could we basically have a spreadsheet developed to present to the committee so that we have a one-page look at the progress made by each of the contract and grant schools. And again, what we're seeing is with the BIE an aspect of the fact that we're asking for a meeting, we're asking for information, and there seems to be a reluctance. And I'm almost tempted to go seek assistance from the congressional delegations to go to Department of Interior and then down to the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs. There is that aspect that we can pursue. And I guess in no uncertain terms, the committee would seek that avenue to get a meeting with the appropriate officials with the Bureau of Indian Education. With that, Ms. Helen Brown, I understand you're on the call now. And basically, Ms. Ghani has relayed that the responses within the cap are ready for legislation. And do you have a draft and the audit, actual audit? And that was the reason I was wanting you to be on the call, Ms. Brown.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can. Thank you for responding.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman So and members of the HESI committee. This is Helen Brown from the Office of the Auditor General. I am the Delegated Auditor General. I apologize for getting on the call in the middle of your discussion. So as far as the corrective action plan, I can only speak to what we've completed through our office. And so the most recent, there are two different audits that we've recently completed. Of course, the first one is the performance audit of the Navajo Head Start. We work with that program closely. They completed their corrective action plan. We accepted that plan. And then it was moved forward to the, I'm sorry, excuse me, to the parent advisory or the parent policy committee for their approval or concurrence. And then it went over to the Navajo Board of Education also for their concurrence. So both of those parties supported the corrective action plan that was developed by the Head Start program. So now that we got those concurrence, we are moving forward with the legislative process to get formal approval of the Head Start's corrective action plan. And so that's how I had asked you, sir, Mr. So, to be the sponsor for our legislation. So once that legislation is signed off and then it gets assigned to the committee, it will be going back before HESI for formal action on that legislation. At that time, I can do a synopsis of the report again, just to remind the committee of the audit findings from that performance audit. And then the Navajo Head Start will be presenting the corrective action plan that they developed and was accepted by my office. We'll be asking for the HESI committee support on that corrective action plan. Once it's addressed by your committee, then it'll move forward to the Budget and Finance Committee, who has final approval. And we'll be doing the same thing before that committee. We'll be providing an overview of the audit findings. And then the Head Start committee, the Head Start program will be presenting its corrective action plan. Once the Budget and Finance Committee approves that corrective action plan via the legislation, there will be a resolution that will be issued, and it will basically commit the Head Start program to implement that corrective action plan over a 12-month period. My office will be directed to go back after 12 months to do a follow-up on that corrective action plan to determine Head Start's progress in implementing those corrective measures to address the findings in the performance audit. So with that being said, my office will be continuing to work with Dr. Bitsui and the Head Start program, as well as Ms. Ghani with the Department of Diné Education in addressing this particular audit, as well as the corrective action plan. We still have some work that we're going to be doing together to ensure that the audit findings will be addressed going forward. So I'll go ahead and pause there. Chairman So, if there's any questions or comments, and hopefully I'm speaking to the correct subject matter at this time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Brown, yes, you are talking exactly to the aspect that we wanted to discuss. And right now, what you have in hand to get the legislation going, could you deliver it to, or have delivered to, council delegate's office, or to either Mr. Mose or Ms. Benali, so that we're going to be meeting at Lukachikai Community School tomorrow, and I have the legislation request form that I can fill out that would accompany the audit and the cap. We could coordinate that aspect, then could enter the legislative request to OLC. Ms. Brown. Mr. Mose, Ms. Benali, could we coordinate that?
Yes, we'll keep in particular attention to the email from Brown's office.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman this is Helen Brown again from the Auditor General's office. For your information, sir, we did deliver that legislation packet over to the council delegates office on the morning of October 6th. So that should have been placed in your box, hopefully. And then my understanding is from there, only delegates can drop off those packets with the Office of Legislative Counsel. My administrative assistant sent you an email on 10/6/2021 at 11:25 a.m. to inform you that we did drop off that packet. So that's just the latest update, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. I appreciate that reminder. I'm still going through pile of email. I think it was November or October 2nd. Received 85, and I'm still threading through those. So, Mr. Mose, if you could go to the delegate office and open my mailbox and bring all my mail to look at Chikai, I would really appreciate that. We would
No problem.
Thank you. So, with that, committee members, are there further questions? And I think, Ms. Brown, you've been pretty thorough in your presentation, so if you want, then you could get off the call. But committee members, are there any questions for Mrs. Ghani? Sure. Honorable Slater.
Thank you. This is not related to Head Start, but I wanted to know if we can update on where the superintendent hiring and position, where that whole thing is at right now. I don't know if Ms. Ghani is in a position to provide that information or if it's from the Board of Education, but that's what I'd like to understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Slater. Ms. Patricia Gordon.
Honorable Delegate Slater, thank you for that question and request for an update. It has been a process and some time for the search for a superintendent here. What I can provide to Health, Education, Human Services Committee this afternoon is that the Board of Education approved a resolution recommending Dr. Harold Begay for the position of Superintendent of Schools with Doty. And that recommendation was forwarded to Health, Education, Human Services Committee by Mr. Matthew So, who is our legislative analyst. And what I understood is that Health, Education, Human Services Committee requested for some language in the resolution to be amended. And just on the periphery of the process, the Board of Education have told me that they have spoken, that they have submitted a resolution which contains some conditional language, as I understand. More specifically, it states that the candidate is recommended for the position based on his or her favorable reference and background check. I think there seems to be a difference between Hess and Navajo Board of Education as to that conditional language within the resolution. And just having spoken to board president, she has indicated that the resolution stands and Hess can accept that resolution, which does support the recommendation of Dr. Harold Begay to move the process forward. So just generally, that's what I am aware of in terms of where that recommendation is. I had requested that we have some sort of a written communication to yourselves as the oversight committee. And I'm not sure if a written language has been prepared or submitted to you, Honorable Slater and Chairman So. So that's my response to your question and request for.
No,
go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Ghani. Honorable Slater, do you have follow-up? And again,
yeah, I mean, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I got very lost during that answer, but it seems like we do have a resolution to work off of, and if that's the case, then is Mr. Abeda on the line?
Yes, Vice Chair, here.
Thank you. Can you review the Board of Education resolution and prepare it as legislation for Chair So or a committee member or another delegate to move forward with confirming Mr. Begay?
Okay, Vice Chair or Chair, can you respond?
Hey, go ahead.
Vice Chair Slater, that is correct. That actually, the resolution that the Navajo Nation Board of Education that they produced, we did say that we just sent it back to the Board of Education to issue a new resolution, one without conditions, and we haven't drafted that yet. So unless, I mean, from what I'm understanding now is that you want to go ahead and go forward with the current resolution. But the current resolution does have conditions on it. And so I just wanted to make sure what your HESI wishes to do. Thank you.
So
follow up.
Thank you. You said that Legislative Council requested from the Board of Education a resolution without conditions, or who made that request? And then second, can you specify what the conditions are? And I guess also explain why it would be necessary or why we would need to get a resolution without conditions.
Honorable Slater, the committee discussed this item previously. And our question revolved around additional reference check. That was the Board of Education's and Mr. Abeda, could we then, since we're talking personnel issue,
Correct. Shoot.
should we go into executive session? Or Beta?
Want to, I don't know what their issues are. Just asking for it.
Chair.
Mr. Beta.
Let me talk to Chief Legislative Counsel real quick.
Sure.
Sajat?
Yes.
So this is Priscilla Benali.
Oh.
I'm sorry, Yat. Hello, all of you gentlemen there, and Shadeja for on the HES committee. I'm sorry for my tardiness. I've been flying in the air, so I finally got to a safe place where I could call in. So I understand that you are discussing the superintendent resolution. Is that correct, Sajat?
Yes, basically, Honorable Slater is wanting to pursue the appointment process, and we did mention an individual's name, and in that respect, that's how come I'm asking Legislative Counsel if it would be appropriate go into executive session to discuss the matter more fully.
Thank you, Sajat, for that, and also Delegate Slater. That would be a good idea, so we can fully discuss what we need to in executive session. I would appreciate that also.
Chair, I guess I would motion to go into executive session.
Thank you, Honorable Slater. In that manner, I'll recognize that motion. Do I have a second, committee members?
Second, Delegate Paul Begay.
So, thank you for seconding the motion. Cecilia, Honorable Slater. The length of time we would be in executive session.
I'd say for no more than 45 minutes, and if we get done earlier, then we'll come back and resume earlier.
Thank you for 45 minutes. Mr. Mose, roll call vote on the motion to go into executive session.
Yes, sir. Honorable Paul Begay Jr.
Delegate Paul Begay votes green.
Paul Begay Jr. votes green. Honorable Purnell Halona. Honorable Purnell Halona. Honorable Carl Russell Slater.
Green.
Honorable Carl Russell Slater votes green. Honorable Charlene So. Honorable Charlene So. Honorable Edison J. Wanika. Honorable Edison J. Wanika. Honorable Pernell Alona. Honorable Edison J. Wanika. Chair, I voted 2 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Mose. By that aspect, we don't have a quorum. Somebody text Honorable Pernell Halona and Honorable Edison Wanika and Honorable Charlene. So they might also be having problems with their devices.
Chair, this is Leonard. Honorable Halona's online, but he might be having difficulties. I see his name on the list here.
Okay,
The other 2, I don't.
okay.
Sure.
Honorable Slater.
Thank you. For reports in a work session, do we need a quorum? Because we're not taking action on anything. Or is it for the purpose of affirming the decision to go into executive session?
Yes, it's that aspect of going into executive session. Ms. Barbara, Mr. Abeda, what is the rule necessary to go into executive session? The committee rule.
Chair, Sheeta Snitch, Chad.
Oh,
Hey,
go ahead.
Dana or Chief Legislative Counsel is having technical difficulties trying to get on the call. I mean, she's on the call, but we're trying to respond, of course. So we're logging back in right now. So I'm deferring that question to Chief Legislative Counsel.
Okay. Ms. Barbara, whenever you can get on. Over in the Window Rock area, are you guys experiencing wind? Also,
Sure as heck is windy at Round Rock. It's been incredibly windy for the last day or so.
And so we have some offices that are experiencing some issues with internet connectivity too. So I assume that that's how the Office of Legislative Counsel is being impacted this afternoon.
yeah. I know where I'm usually at, that's when it's windy, it's pretty tough to stay connected. Ms. Benali, could you also text Honorable Wanika and
Sure.
Honorable So? Yes.
This is Office of Legislative Counsel. So I did speak to Chief Legislative Counsel, and since this is a work session, you don't need a quorum.
Okay. All right. With that, committee members, we'll go into executive session with the vote of 2 in favor. If you're not voting, I see that Ms. Benali has sent out the executive session number. Ms. Benali, to Ms. Priscilla Benali, Ms. Patricia Grani, Legislative Counsel Chad Beta, and Ms. Bob Ross, Chief Legislative Counsel, as well as committee members, and yourself and Mr. Mose.
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So we'll dial into the executive session number.